Well, I read the passage we're going to look at in Matthew, and I was so excited to get into it. If you look at my notes, I usually put the date and the message and the passage, and I just got right into it. And I thought, wait a minute, I never put the message in there after I printed it out. So I had to put it in later. And I've entitled this, Like Wow. Like Wow. Because it's a lot of Jesus saying, it's like this, it's like this. And he gives us a lot of good ideas about the kingdom of God. So if you turn with me to Matthew 13, and it's broken up in two, but as we read it, you'll see how it flows together. So Matthew 13, and we're going to start in 31 and 32, and then we're going to jump ahead to 42 to 52. Matthew 13. (31 to 32, and then 42 to 52. And it reads as follows. He told them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed, which a man took and planted in his fields. Though the smallest of all seeds, yet when it grows, it is the largest of garden plants, and comes a tree, so that the birds come and perch in its branches. And then skipping down to 42, they will be thrown into the blaze and fiery furnace, and there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Then the righteous will shine like the sun in the kingdom of his Father. Whoever has ears to hear, let him hear. The kingdom of heaven is like a treasure hidden in a field. When a man finds it, he hid it again, and then in his joy went and sold all that he had and brought that field. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant looking for fine pearls. When he found one of great value, he went away and sold everything he had and bought it. Once again, the kingdom of heaven is like a net that when it's let down into the lake and caught all kinds of fish. When it is full, the fishermen pulled it up on the shore. Then they sat down and collected the good fish in the basket, but threw the bad ones away. This is how it will be at the end of the age. And the angels will come and separate the wicked from the righteous and throw them onto the blazing furnace, where they will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Have you understood all these things? Jesus asked. Yes, they replied. He said to them, therefore, every teacher of the law who has become a disciple in the kingdom of heaven is like the owner of a house who brings down out of the storeroom new treasures as well as old. May the Lord bless the reading of his word. Well, as you can see, this is the story of the mustard seed. And these passages are covered, and the stories are told both in Mark and Luke as well. But here we're looking at Matthew today. And one really thing that stuck out with me between the other Gospels and how they look at these passages and look at these parables and note these parables is Mark just says there's mustard seed planted and different things going on. But we see how Matthew says a man sows seeds and a woman bakes bread, and the farmer and the servants, as we saw last week, and what he talked about and how they went about different things. So we see this in the Bible many times, and how it's small, something so small, but yet it has fantastic it has small beginnings, but it's fantastic the way it comes together. And I'm thinking of great oak trees. They're just tiny little acorns when they first start, and they can grow to be huge trees. And Jesus really wanted them to know what the kingdom of heaven was like and was all about, And he shows them this and the different things that it is like. And we do this all the time, don't we? When we're trying to tell people about different things, or get them to understand different things about us, or things we saw, or things we've experienced. It's like this, it's like that. I've used this many times, and it helps us to understand. It helps us to take in what is being said and what it should mean to us. So we look at this, and I've gotten to many discussions sometimes of the mustard seed. And what does it mean? And how is this story unfolding? And I think he wants us to know that we can both grow as a seed, and the kingdom of heaven will grow as a seed. Just like we're told in other places about the leavened bread and how it comes to fruition. And this bush grows so big that birds of the air can nest in it. Now, I once heard a pastor preaching on this, and he said, see, the birds are evil. The birds are evil. Because we turn in other places where somebody scatters seed and the birds eat the seeds. And then that's not to be taken here. It's just to show you how big it's grown. That's all Jesus wants to say. And if we take more from it, we're missing the point. But we get a good idea of birds, even way back in Nebuchadnezzar's time, in Daniel 4:12, and then again in 21. These two verses which I'll read. Its leaves were beautiful, its fruit abundant, and on it was food for all. Under the wild animals found shelter, and the birds lived in the branches. For it every creature was fed. And this is talking about the kingdom of Babylon, and that Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom, and then finding with leaves beautiful and abundant fruit, providing food for all, giving shelter to the wild animals, and having nesting places in the branches for birds. So we see how we're getting this idea that even the Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom, which was not permanent, which had its faults, is similar in Jesus trying to get people to understand just how big of a kingdom of heaven it is and how permanent it is. The kingdom of Babylon was a great kingdom, but it was short-lived. And the kingdom of heaven is far greater. And it's a permanent kingdom, one that will last forever, that will never end. And we can see these comparisons. And we see how this kingdom of heaven is hidden away. The kingdom of heaven was hidden away, and not many people know about it or knew about it. That's why Jesus came down to teach and to preach, and how the kingdom of heaven can grow and expand. So much so that it's plain to see. And we see this in the mustard seed. Now, many people have taken great pains to argue, and rightly so, that the mustard seed that Jesus said is the smallest seed at that time was not the smallest seed known to mankind. So they're thinking, was there more into it? Well, how does it play into it? Why is Jesus saying it's the smallest seed if it's not the smallest seed? So they get that part. And then they go ahead and say, well, the mustard plant really does not grow into a tree. I mean, it's a big plant, and everybody would understand that. But it's not a tree. I mean, birds can perch in it. But I think if we start to analyze and talk about it in that regard, we're missing the whole point of the story. And I've had that many times. I don't know if you've had that many times where you try to explain something to somebody and you draw an analogy, or you say it's like this, and they go ahead and get caught up in your analogy rather than the point you're trying to make. And you're like, no, I really need you to focus back on what I'm trying to say. And that's what we can do. We can start, pretending we're botanical experts and saying, well, the plant and the seed and this and that. And then we miss the whole point of what Jesus is trying to say. And I think we need to keep that in mind when we read the Bible, when we study the Bible, because there's many times that we can get sidetracked, many times that we can get off course. And I've seen it many, many times where people would take a verse or a passage or a large chunk of the Bible out of context to either prove their point or to come up against God. And it just makes them, at the end of the day, in my humble opinion, look foolish, because they're not focusing on what Jesus is trying to say, or the person trying to say, or what God is trying to say. So we see how this comes together, and we see how things work in the kingdom of heaven. And we also got that with many different examples he gives, like the leaven and the yeast, and how it grows the dough. It's been put in the dough, and it covers so much. And I think his main point he wants to make is how everything is taken in, how everything can be taken over by the kingdom of heaven. It's a powerful, huge, permanent kingdom, and we need to keep that in mind. So the mustard plant, maybe not a tree, but we understand. We understand what he's trying to get at. And that's so important that we look at that. And somebody might say, well, there's times in this part of Matthew where he's talking to the disciples alone, and he's talking to the crowd. And somebody might say, well, this is only for the disciples. But it's for everybody. I think we'll find at the end when he does address the disciples and how he wants them to make sure they understand. But he also wants the crowd to understand it. And by the fact that we are reading it here today, puts us in the mix of the crowd so that we can understand. Because we're working for the kingdom of heaven. And many times we have misunderstandings of what heaven's going to be. I often remember that Far Side cartoon where the man's sitting on top of a cloud in heaven, and he goes, I think I should have brought a magazine because I got nothing to do. But I think there will be lots to do, and we'll be praising and we'll be worshiping, and heaven will be heaven. And the kingdom of heaven, once become a part of that, will be fantastic. That we can become a part of that we are part of it. And that's a fantastic, fantastic way to be. So, then we move on to the treasures and the pearls, which I sort of focused on in the children's story. I'll be honest with you, I put this message together, and I looked at, and it's Jesus saying, it's like this, it's like this, it's like this. And for me, it was kind of hard to keep up. Because Jesus giving example, example, example. So in my message, I might just focus more on one than the other or what have you, but it's like, it just keeps going because Jesus really wanted us to understand. And as I've said many times from this pulpit, many times in conversations, Satan never tells you the downside. He'll try to convince you it's all good to follow him, to listen to him, to do what he wants to do. But Jesus will tell you the good and the bad. He will give you the whole story. He's not like a salesman that's going to try to trick you or hide certain things or just tell you the story you think you want to hear. So that's why I think he gives so many examples so that we could keep up, so that we could understand, and that we could be committed to the kingdom of heaven. And that's a fantastic way to be. And we see this in the different examples he gives. And we can find the secret of the kingdom of heaven. It's hidden and now it's found. Like that treasure in the field. And how it's worth at any cost. That we can sell everything. That there's no earthly treasure that will ever come close to the kingdom of heaven. That will ever come close to the kingdom of heaven. And we have changed a lot in the last 100 years even. When I stop and think of the different things available to us and the treasures that we have in the way of education, in the way of science, in the way of medicine, in the way of different things going on in the world just over the last 100 years. But even still, with all the conveniences we have, with all the comforts of life, nothing will compare to the kingdom of heaven. So it's worth the cost. And the beauty of it is the cost is nothing. All we have to do is believe. And that's the beautiful aspect of it. So when we look at the pearls and the treasure in the field, we can get a misunderstanding. Well, maybe we have to sell something. Maybe we have to give up something. And yes and no, we have to give up something, but we have to look to to Jesus, to focus on him. That's where our hope should be. But it's in our human nature to hold on to things that are worthless. But Jesus is waiting with such a treasure, something so great. So we look to the buried treasure in verse 44. The kingdom of heaven is like a treasure hidden in a field, which a man found and reburied. Then in his joy, he goes and sells all that he has and buys that field. So that's a popular story. I think even in today's day and age, we don't maybe talk about a field or coming across a treasure, but we often hear different stories of people going to flea markets or yard sales and picking up something that's for a few dollars and ending up to be a huge treasure that's worth thousands and thousands of dollars. You know, it's not understood by the seller, but the person who bought it finds out and they see that there's a great treasure. There was a bowl that was bought at a yard sale or a garage sale, and it turned out to be an ancient Chinese bowl that was worth $90,000. I saw a story on that. So that it's popular when we want to hear these stories of different things and found treasure and people on the beach with a metal detector finding different things. So we have this because it goes back to the time when people, they didn't have banks, they didn't have anything they really could really trust their treasures. They would place their treasures, so they would bury them in the ground for safekeeping. You know, not like today where we have different things and different assurances, but they would have that, especially in time of crisis. You know, we even get that now on the TV with people, buy gold in time of a crisis, which I have never understood. Because if I want to get gas, I want gas. A little piece of rock, shiny rock, is not going to get me the gas. But anyway, all to say that the treasure is not the treasure we may think it out to be. So we don't get the story behind the landowner. And me thinking about it, well, isn't that the landowner's treasure? And we don't know if he's passed or what's going on or what's happening. But again, let's not get caught up in the details because we miss the message that Jesus is trying to say. We can focus too much. You know, I've used that example one time I saw in a movie one time, and a man's trying to please a friend and try to make friends with a guy, and he has some learning disabilities, and he gives him a brand new TV and he puts it down before him. He says, "Look what I bought you." And he looks at him and says, "That box looks like good cardboard. I'd like to use that box. It looks like it's sturdy. I could hold a lot of things in it." It's like, I didn't give you the cardboard box. It's the TV inside. That's what I gave you, not the cardboard box. Mind you, can have the cardboard box. And I think sometimes when we dwell too much on the parables and the details, we get lost in the message that Jesus is trying to say. So we have a land. He finds the treasure on there. And he goes ahead and sells everything so he can get that treasure. He sacrifices. Goes through hardship. But once the kingdom of heaven is truly understood, nothing else can compare to its value. And I think that's the message that Jesus wants to get across. He doesn't want us to go looking for treasure. He doesn't want us to sell everything for other things. But he wants us to focus on that nothing can compare. Whatever hardship we have, whatever we're going through, to the love of Jesus Christ and being a part of that kingdom of heaven. And then we get to this pearl. Again, now in today's day and age, they have synthetic pearls. And I don't know if pearls have fallen out of favor or not. I don't know. But anyway, we see in times past, there was display of wealth. And people had even there was a huge pearl in the gates of the New Jerusalem that we hear about in Revelation. So a pearl holds value and jewelry and different things. So this merchant's looking for it, and where is he going to find it? And he sees this beautiful pearl. The one pearl more valuable than all the others, which is the kingdom of heaven, like the kingdom of heaven. This one pearl is so much more valuable than all the rest. And that's our relationship with Jesus Christ is so much more valuable than anything else. The emphasis is on that one pearl and eclipses all others, all other pearls. And that's what we need to focus on, this relationship we have with Jesus Christ. And then he finishes up, boy, I'm telling you, he's just rapid fire about this net and going fishing, and they set their nets down. And I love how many of his disciples were fishermen, and fishing was a common term and a common occupation at that time. People would understand what's going on. They would understand what needed to be done and not done. And he uses this example, and it's fantastic how it can come together. Because the fish in the lake are all the same. A fish is a fish. But then we see the nets are dropped down, and we get echoes of the story we read before. That they capture all the fish, and they're brought together. And then they're put out on the beach, and they're sorted out. And we see this many times. I'm sure you've watched, or years ago when I was a kid, I used to go on field trips to different plants and factories to see how things were made. And you would see how they would toss away the rejects of things that weren't made properly or things that just didn't come up to standard, and they were tossed away. Karen and I went to Hershey the other day, and they had a whole place for mismade chocolates. You could get them cheaper that were made incorrectly, but they were still good chocolates. So we got the chocolate. But anyway, they're going to take out the bad fish, and they're going to have the good fish, just like the wheat and the weeds that we looked at last week. At the end of the time, not now. We need to be patient. Sometimes we want patience and we want it now. And we want justice, we want it now. But there'll be the good and the bad. There was about 20 species of fish I was in my research here in Lake Galilee. And some were edible, but the Levitical rules said that you couldn't eat with fish only with fins and scales. So things like catfish were out, and which were common in Galilee, and eels. I don't know who would want to eat an eel, but the fish caught would be taken apart, taken out. And we see this at the end times. We see this with the wheat and the weeds, and we see this in the final judgment. And final judgment will come. I know sometimes we want final judgment right now, when somebody wrongs us, or somebody does evil in the world, or to us, or to a friend, or to a group of people. Why doesn't that guy get justice right now? Why do things happen the way they do? But we know that things will happen, and things will take place, and the sun will shine on the good and the evil, and the rain will fall on the good and the evil. And we get frustrated. We don't know why God does what he does. But I was thinking this past week about just a simple verse in Revelation 7. And it says, God will wipe away all our tears. Because I think when we see that final judgment, and we're in part of the kingdom of heaven, we will understand why God has done what he did. And we will be there forever with him and have that great fellowship together. So they pull the net out of the lake. They don't pull it out prematurely and miss the good fish or the bad fish. They pull it out always. And again, don't get caught up too much in the analogy or the parable, but see the message there and how things are sorted out and things are made known. And the good is kept and the bad is tossed away. And we see how the wicked and the good will be separated in Judgment Day. And then he concludes all these parables with the householder. And in some passages, of course, he's called a scribe or the person writing it. And let me just read it again in 51 and 52. It says, have you understood all these things? Jesus asked. Yes, they replied. So now he's going to talk to the disciples. Before he was talking to the crowd, he says, therefore, every teacher of the law who has become a disciple in the kingdom of heaven is like the owner of a house who brings out his storage room, new treasures as well as the old. Now, if you've been following Jesus, you've been a Christian for any time, you don't need to read too far into the New Testament. And as soon as they say teachers of the law, Scribes, Pharisees, Sadducees, those are the bad guys. We got that. That's easy. We always like to put people two-dimensional because we can either call them a good guy or a bad guy. And two-dimensional arguments are much easier to win or to defend. And it's the same thing. But then now he says, teacher of the law. And some translations even say scribe. And we always say, well, not the scribe. I mean, other than a few examples of, say, Nicodemus, we get this very bad example. But he says, now what's happening here? But I think if they understand and they get it, they have their storerooms, they have the Old Testament and the teachings and the prophecies, and then they have the New, which we put together, and we see how they go so well together. So as I said, I think he's really starting to address the disciples and say, do you get it? Because you got to teach people. And you're bringing in the Old because they would know the Old and the Old Testament and the prophecies, and seeing how the prophecies being fulfilled and seeing how you can move on from here and put them all together, which I think we too need to put all together. I think that's why he gave so many examples. We have to stop and put them all together so that we can understand the kingdom of heaven, understand what we're working for. And that's a fantastic way. Jesus checked with the disciples whether the explanations he has offered have been understood. And that's the way you always want to be in life. You know, when you're teaching somebody new or something, do you understand? I once heard a teacher, we were in the middle of class, and we were doing a math problem or science. I can't even remember, to be honest with you. And I remember there was another student in class, he goes, I understand. And the teacher says, I wait all year just to hear that. As soon as I hear that, my year is made, he says. I understand. And you get the point. And I think that's what Jesus really wanted them to do. To say that anybody can be a disciple of Jesus Christ. And we can disciple others by telling them, showing them the way. And Jesus wanted them to know so they could show people the other way. And those who will of my Father in heaven. So if we are that way, every person will have the new and the old, and we can put it together, and we can live together, and we can have that. As I said, this teacher of the law, if he understands the law, if he takes it to its logical end and understands what's going on, the things of new and old will go together. And the secrets themselves will become known. So Jesus and his disciples indeed understood the old and the new truths, and how they come together and how they work together so that they could have that. And the message of the kingdom of heaven did not wipe a clean slate, but rather brings fulfillment to what's gone before. It's not an us or a them. It's not a this but not that. It's everything put together. The old is not abolished, but the old helps us understand and shows that the new is coming, whatever's been prophesied. So we've had many examples today of the kingdom of heaven as Jesus put them forth. So let us take hold of them, know them, and take them to heart. And don't get too caught up in the details. We can many times there. So that we can understand the kingdom of heaven. Because at the end of the day, that's what we're all a part of. The kingdom of heaven. A wonderful kingdom. An everlasting kingdom. A kingdom that is far greater than any other thing we can be a part of. Any other thing we can own. Anything else we can possess. We've had many different examples that we had. And these are fantastic examples to help us understand and live a life that Jesus wants us to live. Being part of the kingdom of God. I love this passage. Like I said, you got to kind of sit down and take it back. And I would encourage you to read all of Matthew 13 because we've been going through a lot of the different examples and the different parables that Jesus is putting forward so people would understand, so that we can understand. And I hope you understand today. If not, we can study, look at it. You can ask me a few questions afterwards. But if you want to take that first step and give your life to the Lord, come forward. And we have the waters of baptism. find out how are you living your life. If you want to live your life and not understand as some people did, that's sad. And if you're holding on to treasures, which can manifest themselves in many different ways, it's time to let go of that treasure, because we have an everlasting treasure with the kingdom of God. If you want to come forward and pray with me as we close our service today, I will gladly pray with you.